our story continued part 2. So Trev and I are dating at this point. Like, we were several months in and we were getting really serious. He was serious from the start. It took me a while to get to that point, but get a couple months in. At the time, like, I'm living in Rupert, he's living in Blackfoot. It's a little distance away, so we were commuting back and forth to see each other, which, great. And so it was coming fall, and decided, let's go ahead and just join forces and I'll move in. So I moved out of Rupert and moved into the house in Blackfoot. And we were there for a little while. We were actually, when I moved in there, we were actually looking at buying a house, buying some property, buying a house, and going on our own. So at the time, we had a little bit saved up, but I had just gotten out of a divorce. I was going through some financial struggles, and I had to figure shit out, just flat out. And so Trevor was basically like the main source of income and everything. And so it was basically like whatever he could afford, that's what we got to do. So we start house shopping, start looking for property, start looking for places. And you guys, this is in 2011. This is still during the recession. Like, things were really crappy as far as the economy goes. Property was going for cheap, and interest rates were crazy. Were like crazy low. So it was a great time to buy if you could afford it. So we pulled money together, pulled resources the best that we could, and we bought a house. So we bought a house up in Rexburg, and it's the same place that we're at now. And when we took a look at this place, it was a little smaller as far as like property acreage goes, but it was like a perfect house. It was just, it felt right. So put an offer in, got it, moved in. Yeah. So we moved into a log house. It's a 3-story. We have a basement, main floor, and then an upstairs. And got moved in. I want to say it was like the end of November or so that we moved in, and everything was going great. At this point, Trev and I have been talking about marriage for a little while, so we were getting really serious. And we were actually looking at rings. So we were upstairs. It was one evening. I want to say it was maybe like January or somewhere around there. And we were just sitting on the couch is all we were doing. I think we looked at rings, and then we turned on the TV and we just started watching a movie. And Trevor, just super duper romantic, like, being sarcastic, just turned around and was like, "Hey, will you marry me?" And I turned, I was like, "Yeah." Super romantic, like. That's just kind of how we are anyways. So that's how we got engaged technically. And got the ring, all that normal stuff. Guys, when we moved to our property, when we moved to our place here in Rexburg, there was nothing on it. There wasn't even any gravel in that. It was basically just a big, huge dirt pasture lot. There was basically like a small little gravel driveway up in the front, but basically everything back here was all dirt. There was nothing back here. And I mean nothing. There was like one string hot wire when we moved on that the previous owner had just left. So, and at the time, you guys, we had like 14 head of horses or something like that together. Like, we had a lot of horses. So like, we needed to figure something out. So when we bought our place too, you guys, like, we could not afford hardly anything. We were on such a radically tight budget that like anything that was out of the budget was like a blow. So we really couldn't afford like much fencing. We basically just used borrowed stuff and some panels and just put makeshift stuff up for a while till we could afford to build some fence. So there was nothing back here. It was all pretty much just bare bones. Which was great because then for us at least, we could build everything from scratch. We don't have to worry about having to tear things down. It was basically just, everything was from scratch from how we would want it to be from the start. So, went through winter, got by through winter, and got engaged, we're making wedding plans and all that stuff. Well, here come May, everything's thawing out, and everybody's kind of just getting ready to start irrigating. Well, I go down into our basement, and our basement's flooded. This is, I think, like the end of May, and our basement is like 3 inches deep in water. The whole entire basement. You guys, our basement at the time was completely 100% finished. So our basement's flooded. And you guys, at that time, we could hardly afford groceries at this point. So, you know, that was like a huge, massive blow to us. It was like, we can't afford to redo this. Like, what do we do? So we just basically went through and got everything dried out. We had fans down there for, I swear, for like months. Just to make sure everything was dried out and just to try and like path of least resistance for mold. So got things dried out. So we went through the basement and we gutted the entire basement. Gutted the basement, got everything moved around and everything. And you guys, our basement has been unfinished since. It's been almost, well, let's see, that was then. So it's been like not quite 12 years. It's a work in progress. So, you know, we lost all those rooms down in our basement. And guys, the majority of our extra spare rooms and everything and space is down in our basement. So we lost all of that. And we haven't been able to finish it since. It's in the works. It's in the budget. You know, we're working on it, but it just takes time. So, we get married September 1st. It was a beautiful, small little wedding. And, Trev and I kind of hold off to go on a honeymoon. And we decided that, you know what, we've got to do a honeymoon. Otherwise, if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. So what we decided to do is when we got married, we decided that we wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby. And for those of you that may not know, the Derby is in May of every single year in Kentucky. And so our wedding was in September. So we bought tickets right after the wedding. We bought tickets for that following Derby and made plans. Guys, if you guys have not been to Kentucky, I'm telling you, have not been to the Derby, hands down, at least try and do it once in your life. There's literally a budget for everything there. You can go as cheap as you can or as ravishly expensive as you can. There's so many options there. It's not as it's expensive, but it's not as crazy wild expensive as you guys think. So if you haven't, go to the Derby at least once in your life. It is an experience that I cannot tell you how freaking cool and fun it is. Originally, Trevor and I were going to stay in a really nice little hotel there in Lexington. Well, and for those of you guys that don't know, Trevor worked on a world famous thoroughbred farm back there in Kentucky. And so he had a ton of connections, and so that it really kind of helped us out a ton when we went. It made the trip so much more special for us. But he worked on a beautiful farm over there called Juddmont. And he worked there for almost 6 years, and so he had some great connections. So anyways, we were going to go stay in a hotel room there. And, you know, he got to talking to his old farm manager, who we still keep in touch with to this day. And he's like, why are you guys staying in a hotel? Just come stay with us on the farm. And you guys, I have never been around that before. I've been around cowboys and ranches and totally not that, okay? So for me, it was like, what? We get to stay in, what? This is awesome! So anyway, so we cancel the room. We fly there, we get there, and we get to stay in the farm manager's house there at Juddmont, or the broodmare side. And so we stay there, and we get to spend so much time with them, and we get to tour the farm. Trevor knows everything and knows, you know, most people there, and so basically they were just showing me around is all they were basically doing. Showing me their stud, you know, just showing me all these awesome things that, you know, I've never been able to experience. And it was such a special experience that was just so neat, that it just made that whole trip so much more awesome on such a different level. So anyways, we got to, you know, stay on the farm, and then we toured, you know, another world-renowned farm. Got another personal tool there. It was just such a really neat experience. Went to the Derby, went to the Oaks the day before. Like, it was so freaking cool. We had quite a few horses, but over that year or so that we were together, we accumulated more horses. And I think we ended up without foals, I think we ended up with almost 30 head of horses. Almost. On a budget that could afford one. So we just, you know, was slowly, like I said, this was during the recession when it was really difficult. Like, it was a really trying time for a lot of people. Trying time for, you know, finding acreage and all that for horses. Like, it was a hard time. And so, and as some of you guys may or may not know, Trevor and I have a hard time saying no. Especially when it comes to like helping other people and helping like other animals. Like, we have a hard time saying no. So things just happened. We ended up accumulating a whole bunch of mares. And so we grew from like having 2 brood mares to having, I think altogether that we owned, I want to say we ended up right around, I think 19. Somewhere around that. It was like in the high teens. I want to say it was like 18 or 19 mares altogether. And you guys, like, we couldn't afford it, but we, like, when you have a will, there's a way. You find ways to just make it happen. So we had a lot of horses on our small little acreage here, feeding hay and just trying to figure things out financially, make things work. Well, we had a ton of mares, and we were to the point where, like, we needed to find a stud. We needed a stud. Like, we couldn't afford to pay stud fees on that many head of horses. So, scrounged up the money, and we found our old original stud, Koki. He was down in Twin Falls. We were in a situation, things just happened, whatever. And so we ended up with Koki, and he was such a rad stud. So we had Koki for a couple of years until really got to the point, I don't know, I think we're like 4 or 5 years into it with that many head of mares, where hay prices went up, things just drastically went up, and we just couldn't afford it anymore. We just got to a point where we literally couldn't afford it. Like, it was basically either lose our home, lose our place, or get rid of these horses, most of these horses that we don't need. And that was the factor. Like, that's what we ended up doing. We ended up getting rid of a whole bunch of mares, got rid of our stud, and went back down to basics where we could afford to survive. So Trev and I have always dreamed of owning a ranch, owning thousands of acres, running cow-calf operation, running beef cattle and running bison at some point in the distant future, having a big, high dollar band of quarter horse mares, and basically having like this big dream of amazingness. And that's been like a dream since the day we met. This is something that like we have wanted to manifest for years. And, but like, in all honesty, you guys, like, trying to make that work as a first generation is really not easy in this day and age. So it's difficult to make it work financially without going bankrupt. So we actually didn't, purchase any of our own personal cows until way later. Mainly because, 1, we couldn't initially afford it. 2, financially, to make it return is impossible. Like, it just wasn't feasible to do in such small numbers. So there was just no way for us to be able to do it financially where we would actually make a return. So, that was like the big dream. And so like for us, buying this place, doing all that we were doing in the beginning was like, so it was just basically like the door was opening for us. And so that's kind of basically like how all this started. So, but here's the thing, like, so before we got rid of all the mares and went down that path of like went down that path of getting rid of most of the mares in the stud, we ended up getting pregnant. And you guys, like, that is a whole nother funny story on its own. And I'm going to tell you guys that story in part 3 because that one is hilarious. Oh my goodness, on how we found out and how that all came about and all that stuff. So it was quite funny. And I'm going to say this right off bat. I didn't want kids. I wanted kids when I was younger, but when I went through my first marriage and all of that, I didn't want kids. I didn't want to do that. That wasn't part of my life. That I wanted to basically just be horseback and work cows for the rest of my life. That's what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. And that did involve kids. So kids were not really on the brain up until like after Trevor and I got married and I warmed up to it and I really wanted kids. Like I really wanted kids. So, you know, things happen. But I will tell you guys that in part 3 because you guys don't want to miss that. That's actually quite a funny story. And we'll go into like so much more. There's so many things that have happened. Oh my goodness. But I'm going to end on this. When you have a dream with somebody that you guys equally have the same goals and aspirations and things in life, they will come to fruition. You're going to struggle. You're going to have challenges that come up. But if you guys work together, you communicate, which communication, guys, is one of my hardest things. That's one thing that I struggle with, that we work on all the time. But if you communicate, you guys have the same goals, the same dreams, the same, you guys are basically aligned with the same things. You're passionate about the same stuff. You have the same morals and values. When you guys are in alignment as a couple, it becomes easier and more attainable to get. So don't lose sight of your goals and your dreams. If you're, struggling right now, that's okay. I just wanted to give you guys a little upper right now of it's okay. Challenges will come up. We will always be faced with something, but if you are in alignment with each other, it becomes that much easier, and your goals and your dreams become that much, they will actually come to fruition that much quicker. So don't ever give up, and stay tuned for part 3 because it just keeps getting more and more interesting as we go.